PD Masters. Hey!
Hello.
Eric!
So it's working.
Yes. How are you doing? Can you hear me?
I hear you just fine. Do you hear me okay?
Yes. Yes. Perfect. Oh my God.
Well, this is the first time I've done this.
Me too. Glad we're both amateurs.
Great. And it only took us 2 minutes to figure it out, I guess.
Yeah. I must admit I have been reading like how do you like go live and how do you admit people. So
Okay, I just had to figure out how to request to join, I think. So that wasn't as hard.
oh great. Hey,
You must have better lighting or a better camera. Your resolution, your picture looks so much better than mine.
where are you sitting now?
I'm at home. I'm sitting by a window. I mean, I think maybe
I have still. I think that might be the reason why.
maybe if I get away from the window a little bit.
Oh yeah. It's getting better. Did you watch the press conference? That was one of my first.
Today? No.
Yeah.
No, I never watch it live because my Dutch is not that good, actually. So I will wait for DutchNews.nl in English tomorrow
Oh yes.
to kind of summarize it and get the gist of it.
Well, nothing new, so you don't have to watch it.
So the cafes are not going to open on 21 April?
No, that's too soon. Probably they said so. Maybe 28th, but it's not sure. So
And no timeline on the horizon for gyms to reopen?
I don't think the word gym has even been mentioned. So
Sports schools, whatever they're calling them in the news.
cool. Yes. But are you training now? Because
Oh, no. I don't, well, in my training, I'm doing rehab. I'm doing physiotherapy. Um, so my gym these days is going to a physical therapist and a physical therapist studio, if you will. There's a squat rack and some cardio machines and some kettlebells and some pulley machines. But no, I wouldn't call what I'm doing any kind of, well, it's certainly not powerlifting training, but it is kind of rehab and recovery therapy.
and let's start from the beginning.
All
You're
right.
American.
I am a dual citizen. I was born and raised and grew up and spent most of my life yet in Northern California in the U.S. But I'm also a citizen of Mexico. I've traveled there many times. I have worked there sort of business projects, but I've never lived there. But if you look at me, I'm ethnically Mexican. My family comes from there, but I was born and raised in the U.S. And if you listen to the way I talk more American than anything else. But yes, and then besides all that, I'm a permanent resident here in the Netherlands.
Since 20 years, was it?
I first registered in the Netherlands as a resident as March of 2001.
Yes. That's
So
20 years.
20 years in a month. But who's counting? You know, when you're having fun, the time is just flying by.
But can you speak a bit
Netherlands? Ken
Nederlands?
ik? Ja. Wel, ik heb de inburgeringstoets. Ik heb de inburgeringsexamen geslaagd. Dus, en ook in 2014 heb ik een half volwassen koers gehad bij de Universiteit van Amsterdam.
Okay.
Dus in 2014, 2015 was mijn niveau van Nederlands bijna B1.
Okay. Pretty impressive.
Nu misschien, ja, beetje minder.
Okay. Well, we will have this live English because I think there are a lot of international people watching as well, some Dutch as well. So I'm not going to make it hard for you.
Mission accomplished.
But, well, what I always would like to know, how do you find compared to the US?
How do I see Amsterdam compared to the U.S.?
Because when was the last time you were in the US?
I was there for Christmas 2019.
Okay.
So I was going 3 years in a row. My winter holiday was going back to visit my family and friends in Northern California for Christmas. I think I stayed over New Year's that year. So actually, sometime in the first week of January 2020, I came back to Amsterdam and on the direct KLM flight from San Francisco. How would I compare them? Well, let's get some of the easy things out of the way. The U.S. is just a car-dominant country. Everything revolves around cars, especially California. You know, you go to a grocery store, you go to an apartment complex, you go to somebody's home, you expect to have somewhere to park your car. And if you're just going to the grocery store, you expect the parking to be free.
Yeah.
Whether you stay there 90 minutes or 100 minutes or however long, you know, it's just a car-dominant country. Amsterdam is public transportation and bikes, you know.
Yeah.
So it's just much more condensed. It's much more of a European lifestyle, which is within the same neighborhoods. Your ground floors are mostly shops and stores and grocery stores and people living above them, you know. So that's
in Amsterdam, I can say.
Yeah, definitely in the big cities like Amsterdam. You know, another difference would be geographical. I come from California. You have the Rocky Mountains starting all the way from Colorado, going over to the West Coast. You have the you know, various ranges of mountains. So it's much more hilly. You can do climbing within, you know, you can go half an hour from inside Silicon Valley and find somewhere to go hiking or mountain biking. That's very different than the Netherlands. If you want to do mountain biking here, you have to find maybe a bunch of bridges next to each other and get a little, you know, lift from that. I find that Amsterdam is much more compact. I haven't looked at the numbers, but I would say that the population density of Amsterdam is much higher. You know, cities in California at least tend to be much more spread out.
Yeah.
And have a much more space. So you need somewhere to put all these cars, you know.
Yeah.
So that's one difference. And you know, there's also something different about the U.S. in general and the Netherlands, and that is, you know, it's a big deal here in the Netherlands when you have a big Albert Heijn store closing at 10 o'clock at night. You know, every night. You almost don't need an avond. What do they call it on Thursday nights in Amsterdam? Koopavond?
Yes,
you don't need that without some of the Albert Heijns because they stay open till 10. And everyone gets excited. Ooh, Albert Heijn open till 10.
Yeah.
You know, in the U.S., the large chains of supermarkets are open 24 hours. You wake up in the middle of the night hungry, put on a robe and some slippers, go to the grocery store and get milk or whatever you need, whatever craving you have, or go to a drive-through. You know, or you will even find some basic restaurants like a Denny's open all the time.
Yeah.
So there's more, I don't know if you want to call it more of a customer service attitude or just everyone wants to make money all the time. Whatever it is, you know, you kind of expect you can kind of get the basics of what you need just in any time.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Interesting. And, well, you have been living here for 20 years. Would you ever consider moving back to the US for good?
Definitely not in the last 4 years. I'll just leave it at that.
I know. That's what I wanted to ask you as well. Do you have hope regarding the future of the US?
Yeah, so let me take one question at a time here. A lot has changed in the 20 years that I've been away. Mm-hmm. The US has changed, the Netherlands has changed, but I've changed and my lifestyle has changed. I'm a parent now. And I have a 7-year-old child, and I know what it was like going to school in the U.S. And I see now what it's like to try to get a child educated and raise a child in the U.S. And I'm going to say that for me, it just feels better raising a child, having a family in the Netherlands than in the U.S. For me. And so, therefore, I don't really have any thoughts of going back to the U.S. because I just find this for me to be a better place to raise a child. And so, you know, politics aside, in the last 4 years, I absolutely would not have gone back in the last 4 years. I think there's still a little bit of a hangover of that political scene, you know. But I enjoy going to the U.S. There's certainly things I miss about the U.S. But right now, for my life, this is a better place.
Okay, interesting. And let me see, you are quite active in sports. You were, I think, 5, 6 days a week in the gym.
Before I got ill,
Yeah.
I had the time. The progression of my training went from 4 days a week. Then I decided I wanted to try 5, and then yes, the last few months before I got the virus, I was in the gym 6 days a week, every day except Sundays.
And what I noticed is you were very, very cautious. I think you were always wearing a mask even before it became mandatory here in the Netherlands.
Absolutely, yes. So for those of your viewers here, your followers that aren't in the Netherlands, there was a time the gyms opened, and then there was a time later when gyms started requiring masks. I started wearing a mask from the very first day.
Yes.
I was the only one in the beginning, and so sure, I got some looks and maybe some questions about it, but I didn't care. I wanted to take the precautions. So I started using one from the very beginning. I was very careful to follow the gym rules, which was, you had to go there by appointment so they could control how many people. You had to stay in your taped box area, and you had to wipe down the equipment. And then eventually, I even went a little bit further. I disinfected my hands every time I was done with an exercise before I touched my max, so I could drink some water. So I was even that far. And sometimes I would have to remind other people about following the rules. The classic example would be I wanted to use some equipment that somebody else was using. And I would ask them, are you almost done? Can I work in? Most of the time they had one more set. So I'd let them finish their set and I'd come in and I'd see them walking away and I have to call them back and say, excuse me, we have these rules now. Did you clean it? Did you wipe it down? Did you clean it?
Yeah.
And most of the time people were cool about it. They'd say, oh, you're right. I forgot. I'm so sorry. But yeah, I was always following the etiquette in the gym, including not doing curls in the squat rack.
But it went wrong at some point.
It went wrong. I don't know how. I was following all the social distancing rules. I didn't have people over for dinner. I didn't go to people's houses for dinner. I wasn't going out to restaurants or bars. I wasn't going to musical events or crowds. So I don't know. I have to kind of guess how I caught the virus. It's going 6 times a week to a gym, to a public place. Maybe there's a chance it happened there. If I needed to go into the center of Amsterdam, I would take public transportation. Maybe it happened there. A few days before I started feeling ill, I went to the nearby shopping mall. I wiped the shopping cart before I took it, but once you're inside, you're touching packages, you're opening the doors to the refrigerated areas. You're scanning your card and you're pressing the button to pay.
Yeah.
Somewhere along the way, something happened, and I got exposed to it.
Was your family healthy, by the way? Was it only you?
It was only me.
Lucky.
It was only me, and it was partly lucky, but it was also precautions.
Yeah.
I don't know what my incubation period was. I don't know how long the time passed from when I got exposed to when I started feeling the symptoms. But once I started feeling the symptoms, it all went pretty quickly. I started feeling the symptoms on a Tuesday afternoon, and it was even worse Wednesday morning. I got tested the same day. I knew within the next day what the results were. Meanwhile, my family knew what was happening, so they quarantined me at home immediately. The day I started feeling the symptoms, I got quarantined at home, and so we all kind of stayed away from each other, and that's how we kind of make sure no one else at home got infected.
But did you think like, oh, this is COVID, or were you thinking something else?
No. The first day, it didn't feel any different than a flu, really, the first day. But because of the environment, because of the climate, because the virus is there, I thought, this is it. I got the virus. I hadn't felt anything particular on that first day. And my fever lasted, I think, about 4 days. And I kept feeling more and more tired during those days. And by the 5th day, just moving around my apartment became very difficult because I would have challenges breathing. But in the beginning, it really didn't feel any different than just being really sick. But with the environment and what was happening, I figured, okay, I must have got it because, I just figured I must have got it.
And when was the point you needed to go to the hospital?
Yeah, this is an interesting question. Let me answer the question first this way. I probably should have gone to the hospital sooner than I did. Between the day that I tested positive and the day that I went to the hospital, 11 days passed. So I tested on the 21st of October, and I went to the hospital on the 1st of November. I probably should have gone after 5 or 6 days. And so maybe this is a kind of, I don't know if I want to say warning, but maybe a suggestion to everybody else. If you start feeling ill, don't wait. This illness, this disease is new to a lot of people. It's new to doctors. It's new to ICUs. It's new to pulmonologists and cardiologists. It's new to what you call endoscopes or speech therapists. Mm-hmm. Sort of mentally cooperating with it is new for psychologists as well. And it's certainly, if you've never had it before, like most of us haven't, it's going to be new to you too. So what happened to me was during these 11 days that I was home, I was in touch with my house arts, my general practitioner, on 3 different occasions. And somehow they just didn't find the way to bring up the question to ask and figure out how ill I was. So I was at home by the 5th day, done with fever, but completely out of energy and feeling completely gassed cardiovascular-wise anytime I tried to get up and do anything. Mm-hmm. Walk down the hallway to go to the WC and let alone try to take a shower or even change clothes at that point. So I knew I was just out. And I knew I'd never felt that way before. But somehow through the discussions with my GP, it just didn't come out how bad it was. I was led to believe that I just had normal corona. This is what it is. This is what it's like. Just get through it and each day will get better. But it was finally, after 11 days on the 1st of November, I just thought this can't be right. It's getting so hard to breathe after I get up. All I do is kind of sit in a chair and lie in bed all day because anything else makes it so hard to breathe. Mm-hmm. And I just thought this can't be right. I must have lung damage by now.
Yes.
So at that point, I had to take things into my own hands. I called by phone what's called here in Amsterdam the house arts post. It's kind of like an after hours house doctor, after hours neighborhood doctor. I called them. They wanted to examine me. They asked me if I could go to them. I told them I can't walk across my apartment. I can't get to you. I can't drive. I can't ride a bike. I can't walk that far where you are. Mm-hmm. There's a car in my family, but nobody wants to get in a car with me, and nobody should get in a car with me right now. Mm-hmm. So they said, okay, we come to you. They came here, and they were at my flat in 10 minutes. And the first thing they did was slip one of these oximeters on my finger to measure my saturation.
Oh, yes.
And my saturation was 62%. Now, a normal human being should be above 93%, between 93 and 99.
Wow.
And even 90, when you get below 90, it's something to look at. So I was at 62%. So, the people that came said, okay, so that's it. We're going to take you to the hospital. Where do you want to go?
You had the choice.
I had the choice, which which for those of your followers that are listening in Amsterdam or in the Netherlands or even anywhere else, I was quite surprised when I was put in the ambulance and they asked me, where do you want to go? They really left it up to me. Now, I'm quite lucky. 1 or 2 blocks away from me is the FU-MC, the Vrije Universiteit Medical Center. So for me, it was a slam dunk. Just take me there. It's 2 blocks away. And then if I'm there, it's easier for everybody to come visit me even, right? And it's a well-known hospital, so take me there. But and I don't know how common that is, but it's something to think about. Will you get asked the question, where to? You know, and will you pick the place that's closest? Will you choose somewhere that's farther? Is there a place that has a reputation of handling COVID cases? But I didn't know. I would say I was very lucky that when they asked me where to, I picked the FU, which was very close and is one of the best medical centers in the country.
That's good to hear. That healthcare disaster. Okay, so they called the ambulance?
Well, the Huisarts Post that came, they came in an ambulance.
Okay.
So when I called the Huisarts Post, I didn't know it, but I was calling a kind of ambulance service.
Yeah.
And they came and they saw my saturation and they just told the guy outside to come up and bring the bed. I live in a building where there's an elevator, so they could do that, and they took me away.
And how did your family deal with that?
Well, it was a surprise to everybody. It was a surprise to me. I didn't know that was that bad. It was a surprise to my family here in Amsterdam, and it was a huge surprise to my family in California because I didn't want them to worry, so I had not even told them that I'd caught the virus. You know, here I am at home trying to get over the virus or languishing with the virus or whatever, and I hadn't even told them. I didn't want them to worry. So for them to all of a sudden hear, hey, Patrick just got taken to the hospital, and oh, by the way, they put him in the ICU, they were like, what? So it was quite shocking, and I thought I was doing the right thing. I didn't realize how serious it was. I didn't want them to worry. But it was a big shock to everybody. Yeah. Because
you are one of my active followers, and I saw that you basically watch all my stories. And at some point, I never saw your name in the list again. So I must admit, even I was a bit worried. Like, did something happen to him? Because I don't know, you can't, you know, call you whatever. So. But I think after, was it 4 months, I think, at the beginning of this year, you posted a picture after the COVID, and I was absolutely shocked by the weight loss of you. So how can you tell me what happened since the day you went into the ambulance and went to the hospital?
Yeah, so you're talking about weight loss and by kind of absence from social media. So let me try to wrap that all up into one. I was taken to the ICU on the 1st of November. And by that night, I was already induced in a coma and on a ventilator. So it happened so fast, I had no time to do anything.
Were you still conscious?
I was conscious up until the point that they prepared me to put me on a ventilator. And I knew they were going to put me on one. They told me, you know, we're going to put you on. We don't know how long it will be. It's going to depend on how your body reacts, how you respond. Do you recover? Might be 2 days, might be 2 weeks. We don't know. But we do know you need to go on one. And it's going to happen like in the next few minutes. So I was aware of it. I was aware when they gave me the injection to go to sleep. I was aware, I was conscious when one of the most awful experiences was when they prepped me for the ventilator. So, you know, a ventilator is not life support in the sense that a ventilator doesn't purify blood. The ventilator really just circulates the air in your body for you. It's an external set of lungs in that it's moving air, but then your lungs still have to purify the blood itself. Okay. Well, to make that process as effective as possible, they want to get as much air into your lungs at first before they put the ventilator in.
Mm-hmm.
And just telling you to breathe in deeply is not enough. So what I remember was this huge sort of vacuum tube that fit over my face. And I don't know what the volume of air that they were shoving into my face was, but I couldn't keep up with it. It was so much air coming into me because they're trying to force it into your lungs. So your lungs are full of this air when they turn on the ventilator, circulating the air. They want it to be as full as possible. So they just put this thing on my face. I couldn't even breathe big enough gulps of air fast enough.
Yeah.
I tell people it felt like drowning on air. And that's as much as I remember before going onto the ventilator. So, you're talking about the weight loss and what did I do? Well, I mean, for about 60 days, well, let me say it this way. I stayed in the ICU for 50 days.
50.
50.
50.
50. 50. So 1 day over 7 weeks.
Because
I mean,
time now would be 21 days, maybe 2 weeks, I think. So yours is extremely long, I think.
it was long, and I don't know how unusual it is. I think you're right that the average is something like 21 days.
Mm-hmm.
But I can tell you, when I was in the rehab center, I met a lot of people that had been in the ICU as long as me, and I met a couple that had been even longer. But these are probably the extremes. But you got to figure, for the 50 days that I was in the ICU, I didn't do any walking. You know, exercise for me at that point, the first week or two of December, was sitting up on the edge of the bed,
Mm-hmm.
and standing up and getting into a chair so that I just wasn't lying down all day. You know, and the hospital staff would tell me that sitting up gave a better chance for my lungs to open up. So they wanted me to sit up as much as possible. But the first 50 days in the ICU, I mean, there's no walking. I'm spending all day in bed. I wasn't even feeding myself. I was on what they call in Dutch a zondervoeding. So, a tube feeding.
Yeah.
I didn't even have to move my hands to eat. I just lied there pretty much. And so through this inactivity, I went into the ICU at 87 kilograms. And by the end of that, I came out of the ICU, I weighed 63. So it's about a 24 kilo drop, which was about 28% of my body weight.
Wow. You could immediately from the pictures.
And unfortunately, being the kind of person that I am, I analyzed my body composition before and after.
Yeah.
So I estimate that about 16 of the 24 kilos that I lost was lean mass, meaning muscle. So I lost mostly muscle, not fat. So anyone who thinks it's funny out there, oh, I should get COVID to lose 24 kilos. Well, it was mostly muscle.
Let's establish you're not fat at all. You weren't fat either, I think, before. So you were quite fit. From what
my body fat was probably around 20% before I got ill and went to the hospital. I was on a cut, not a big drastic calorie cut.
Yeah.
I was trying to maintain my muscle mass, but cut my fat down a little bit. So I was in a slight calorie deficit at that time. I mean, 87 was my starting weight, and I had been between 87 and 93 for about a year, maybe 1 or 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
But most of my adult life, actually, I weighed about 100 kilos. And it was around, I think, the middle of 2017 that I decided I wanted to try to lean out a bit while still maintaining my muscle mass. 2017, 2018 is when I really started focusing my training more on powerlifting.
And what's your weight now?
My weight now, today?
Yes.
This past Sunday, I weighed myself at 76 kilos and 20% body fat.
Okay, so there's progress.
There's definitely progress, but if you look at 76 kilograms and where I started at 87, right, that's only 11 kilogram difference. And if you think back to a few minutes ago, I said I lost 16 kilograms of muscle. So I'm closing the gap, but it's not muscle. But
Yeah.
but I'm not worried about that right now.
No, exactly, because dependent on oxygen, I think. Am I correct?
What's that now?
You're still dependent on oxygen.
Well, I'm not using any now.
I'm gonna turn on the lights. 1 moment.
I'll respond while you're doing that. I'm not wearing any Zyrtec, any oxygen support now, although I have one right here in front of me. I'm trying to wean myself off of it. I haven't used it when I sleep for many weeks now, probably 6 or 7 weeks. I stopped using it at nighttime when I sleep. I've gone for bike rides and I've gone for walks without it. And I can go, a few hours here at home, walking around and not using it. So I can go without, but it becomes a kind of dependency thing, and it becomes a kind of safety blanket. A couple of weeks ago, I went back to the rehab center for a 1-month checkup.
Mm-hmm.
I was away from home for about 4 hours. And for me, these were quite active hours. I had to take a shuttle over there. I walked around to get a coffee. I walked around, went to my appointment. I'm talking. I went to visit some of the patients that were still there that I knew. I walked around again to say hi to some of the staff. For me, there was a busy morning. And I went 4 hours without putting on the oxygen at all. So I can do it. But anything invigorating, like riding a bike fast or anytime I do the physical therapy,
Yeah.
then I still need it, because then when I'm doing physical therapy, actually I am, to the degree I can, trying to push myself as much as I can.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not doing the weights. I don't have the aerobic capacity I had before the illness, but to try to do more this week than I did last week, I do need a little bit oxygen support then.
Yeah. If we go back, so you were 51 days at the ICU?
50 days, yeah.
50. What happens after that? You go home, like, how did you do it?
Well, in total, it's kind of interesting how the numbers add up. I was away from home for 4 months. And the way that breaks down is I was in the ICU for 50 days here at the FU. And then once I got discharged from the ICU, I was in the COVID normal care ward for another 10 days. So they wanted to observe me outside of the ICU without all the gadgets attached to me. Mm-hmm. They started me doing a little bit more physical therapy, just getting up and trying to walk around the ward once in a while. And also it gave them time to find a rehab spot for me. So 50 plus 10, all in all, I was at the FU hospital 60 days. And on the 60th day is when I transferred to a rehabilitation center. And again, it just worked out that I was there also for 60 days. And everything kind of, because of when I started, it all kind of matches month ends or the beginning of a month. So I went to the ICU on the 1st of November. I left the hospital and went to the rehab on the 30th of December. And then I stayed until the last day of February. 28th February was the day I left the rehab finally and came home.
Did you have thoughts when you were in the hospital?
Say that again?
Could you get visits from your family?
Well, yes and no. So when I was at the hospital, when I was at the FU, whether I was in the ICU or in the normal care, I was still in COVID sanctioned off departments of the hospital. And there, the visitation was very controlled. No matter what, no matter where I went, I was only allowed one visitor per day for an hour. And there were no children allowed at the FU. So it meant at one point I went 80 days without seeing my son because of the quarantine time, then the 60 days that I spent at the hospital, and then my son couldn't come to visit me until the 10th day in rehab. So I think I counted at one point I went 80 days without seeing my son. But so the FU was one visitor per day, one adult, and then it was very restricted. And then when I got to the rehab,
No, what was going on?
did the visitors know?
No, did your son know what was going on? Because he's still quite young, I think.
He's 7 now. He was 6 when I went there. He knew that his father was ill. He knew that I was in the hospital. He knew that I had corona. He has an understanding of what corona is.
Okay.
You know, throughout the whole 4 months that I was gone, I never really got a sense if he understood the gravity of it all. I mean, he was 6 or 7 years old. So what does he want to do? He just wants to do things that are fun. He wants to watch video games, play video games. He wants to do anything with Lego. He wants to play with other children, run around. Coming to visit me is none of that.
No.
And even having a video call, once you get past the, hi, how are you, what did you do today? He's looking for the buttons on the mobile to, how do you play a game on here? How do I play a game with Papa? You know, so if it's none of that, then you know, he's 6 years old. So I had the feeling most of the time that I was away that he didn't really understand it. And it hurt my feelings a little bit. I felt like he didn't really miss me. So that was a little bit hard. But then finally, the last week that I was at rehab, one of the last video calls we had, I asked him, hey, do you know what this Sunday is? Do you know what's coming up? He says, no. I said, Papa's coming home. And then he sparked up. Papa's leaving the hospital? You're not going back?
Oh.
And then he was like, yes, yay. And so then I knew, you know, that behind it all, he was actually looking forward to spending time with me again and had missed me. So, but yeah, no children in the hospital. Children couldn't come until I was at the rehab center. It was still one a day. There was a little bit more flexibility at the rehab center because the rehab center had a reception on the first floor where you had a front terrace and a rear terrace and a cafeteria. Mm-hmm. And so technically, they wouldn't count a person as being a visitor unless they came up the elevator and actually went to my room.
Okay.
So if I came down and met somebody in the reception for a coffee, I even had some friends that came and brought dinner, and they would eat in the cafeteria. When the weather was nice, I had some friends that brought food, and the sun was out, and the rear of the rehab center was facing south, so we would go back behind there and sit outside. And then they could come, and then I could still see somebody later in the evening, because as long as everybody wore a mask and kept their distance, mm-hmm. I found out that they wouldn't really consider it a visitor unless they went past the reception, and yeah. Once you went into the hallways and got in the elevator and went to the room, that was a visit.
They were quite flexible.
They were a little bit more flexible because they had the space. You could go outside.
Yeah. Okay.
In the back. Yeah.
And how rehab go? Because you're still rehabilitating, right?
I'm still rehabilitating now. I go twice a week to a physiotherapist.
Yeah.
It's kind of a drop off from what I was doing before. I mean, you got to figure when you're residing, when you're a resident at a rehab center, you have lots of time to do rehab, and you're scheduled lots of rehab. Monday through Friday, I had 2 or 3 rehab sessions every day, plus occupational therapy, plus meeting with a dietitian, speech therapist, psychologist. I'm probably missing something in there. Oh, once in a while, the doctor. There were weekly doctor meetings as well. So it was quite busy. My days were quite loaded up there. They would give me a schedule on Friday for the next week, and I was set.
So you did receive mental help as well?
Yes, there are on-site psychologists there, and I've continued meeting with a virtually anyways. I continued talking to a psychologist since I've left and came home.
Did you had one in the hospital as well, or you had even strength
Did I have a psychologist at the hospital? Yeah, two things happened at the hospital. They did have a psychologist, and this person would come once a week. But I don't know what it was, but we just never really developed a close enough of a relationship to really open up.
Yeah.
It really felt a bit clinical and introductory the whole time I met with this person. And I think I met with this person 2 or 3 times. What really made a difference for me.
Did you feel that you actually needed it, or?
Well, I'll tell you what, when they offered it to me, I said, yes, absolutely. I would like to meet with somebody. Yes. Now, what I didn't realize was this. I've lived next to the Fu here since 2012, and I've known of the Fu even before that. I didn't know till I was a patient there that the Fu actually has a religious foundation. It was started by nuns. I had no idea. Now, this doesn't mean you see nuns and priests, Catholic priests walking around, but it does mean there's a chapel on site, and it does mean that there is a staff of pastors. And so when I was in the ICU, the staff said to me, we have a chapel here with pastors. Would you like to meet a pastor? And I thought, sure, why not? And I think they said to me, what does any particular religion? What do you practice? And I say, well, I was raised Catholic. I said, well, I don't know if we have a Catholic pastor, but we have others. I said, such as what? And they said, Episcopalians and Presbyterians and Baptists. And I said, you know what? For the stage that I'm at, if it's something based on the Old and New Testament Bible, then it's just interpretations and how you present it in church. If they're one of those, that will suit me. So I met with a pastor, and this guy came to see me every day that he worked. He would come every day, Monday through Friday. If it wasn't a holiday, and he was at the chapel, he would come by and spend an hour with me every day. And at that time, it was really helpful.
Yeah. Because were you afraid that it could go wrong as well? Sure.
There is a period of time that I refer to as the rock bottom period, where I just absolutely was at my worst, where I was just rock bottom of the whole process. I was rock bottom physically, had dwindled down to 63 kilos. I was rock bottom mentally. I was full of anxiety and panic. I was rock bottom because actually physically my body was ready to start doing rehab, but mentally I wasn't ready to try and put myself through it. And so, yeah, definitely there were scary moments where you think, where does this go? You read the statistics, and I see my condition. So where does this go? And these are definitely some things that I talked about when the pastor would come to visit me.
Yes. And were you aware that you were at the ICU for 50 days?
Oh, every day that I was conscious, I knew. In the ICU at the Fu, every room has maximum 2 beds. There are some rooms with 1, but maximum 2 beds. And I was in the 2-bed room. And in the middle of the 2 beds, up on the high on the ceiling, up on the wall, was a clock with a calendar. And it was a digital calendar in the sense that it had the day, the month, and the year. Mm-hmm. So I knew that I had gotten there the 1st of November. And so every day that I was conscious, I could look at the clock and say, okay, today's what? 22nd of November? I'm here on my 22nd day. So yes, every day that I was conscious, I knew how long I'd been there. Yes.
Okay, and could you call at least by phone?
Good point.
Why?
I could not really initiate calls. Um, one of the wonderful things about the flu, I remember I suggested earlier that if you get asked the question where to, be prepared, right? And figure out what's important to you. But what I found out at the flu was, first of all, they had their office phones were wireless. So it meant if somebody called me, and they could just Google, once they knew once they knew what hospital I was at and I was in the ICU, they just had to call and say, we're looking for Patrick in the ICU.
Yeah.
They keep track of what room you're in, what ward you're in, what bed you're in. They know where to send your call. I didn't have a phone next to me, but the nurse's desk did, right? And the phones there were wireless. So they take the call over there. It's my sister or my parents calling from California. They could bring the phone to me.
Yes.
It wasn't like that everywhere else, I can tell you. Just in the same hospital, in the normal care ward, they didn't have these wireless phones.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing was the flu ICU here. I don't know what the purpose was originally, but they had 7 iPads there. And I don't know how it happened. I don't know who asked first. I don't know if I asked them or my family asked or they offered it to me. But pretty soon it became kind of daily to have these video calls through their iPads. And it was a bit of a administrative task for them to do it. They'd have to find out who was it. And it would control the whole thing on some kind of platform. They'd have to find out who are you, and then assign an account. And then you'd have to make sure they got to the platform together, and then you could connect. And then sometimes I have 2 sisters in California, so sometimes they would confuse them. Sometimes between my 2 sisters and my parents, they didn't know exactly who was it, But yes, in the ICU, I could take phone calls, and through the iPads that the flu had, I could take video calls as well.
And did you, when you were at the rock bottom, were you thinking like, okay, maybe I should write letter or video or whatever? Like,
Ooh, I didn't. Maybe I should have. I didn't. Maybe I was optimistic.
You were optimistic.
Yeah, I was optimistic, maybe partly by nature, but I think also by that time, the doctors and staff had given me some optimism as well. So, for example, I'm 55 now. When I was in the ICU, I was 54. I don't consider myself a young person. I'm usually one of the oldest in the gym, for example. And when I take my son to school, I'm usually one of the oldest parents. So I don't consider myself young. But the staff would come to me, and I told you there were these moments where I'm questioning, what's going to happen. And there were times I'd have to ask the doctors, what's going to happen. And the doctors and the staff were always very reassuring. They'd say, look, you're young. And I'd say, what? Do you see me? They'd say, you're young. And I'd say, what? But they'd say, hey, look at the other patients around here. I couldn't see them, but they'd tell me, the other patients around here are 60s and 70s and even some 80s. So comparatively, you're young. You're a fit guy. You're a strong guy. We see that. And your body is responding well, and your body is working hard, fighting back to recover. So we think you'll be fine, So partly because of my own optimism and because what I was hearing sort of reassuringly from the doctors, I was optimistic, and no, I didn't think about doing this last video or last will or last letter or something like that. No.
Good to hear. You survived.
Thanks.
But okay, and after the 50 days, you went to a rehabilitation center?
No, so after the 50 days, I went 10 days more in the hospital, just not in the ICU. I was in a kind of normal observation ward, and also waiting for a spot to open up at the rehab. So there was 10 days after the ICU where I was still in the hospital.
And the rehabilitation, how did that start, and how is
How did it start? um, I
could
think it.
like get a cup of coffee or tea and drink yourself, for example?
Oh well, gosh. Okay, if that's what you mean.
How
There.
weak?
Oh, there. Okay, so let me give you two examples. My mobile device is an iPhone XS Max, so it's one of the big iPhones. I was so weak. There was a point in time I was in the hospital and I couldn't hold the phone up. And I told myself, why do I have such a big phone? I don't need this. I'm never getting such a large phone ever again. I can't hold it up. You know, it's too heavy. I try to read something, I'm just, so that's one example. And another example I have for you, there were times I would tell myself, look at me. I'm a 50-year-old baby in a crib because I can't, other than doing this with my arms and rolling a bit,
Mhm.
I can't get out of bed even. Um, you know, I miss my face sometimes when I'm trying to eat. I couldn't shower, couldn't shave.
Did you see yourself in the mirror as well?
I didn't see myself in the mirror until about the 55th day.
Okay. How was?
And oh yeah, that was, I guess that's one of those things you'll never forget, or that I'll never forget. Yeah, I
Did you make
didn't,
as big?
I didn't recognize myself. I was so thin. My hair was long. I think I hadn't shaven. Um, yeah, I almost didn't recognize myself because this would have been when I was still closer to 63 kilos,
Yeah.
you know, so even thinner than what I am now. Um, but I had moments where I said to myself, I'm just like a baby in a crib. I can't do more than just kind of roll around. And anytime I need something, I'm just pressing the ringer for the nurse to come do it for me. You know, that's how weak I was. And just being able to stand next to the bed would be a big exercise, a big therapy session for the day. Um, so that's how weak I was. I couldn't get out of bed.
Could you eat normal food, or was it liquid, or how gain?
So I was on the liquid feeding um, the 2 months that I was on the hospital, and probably about another month that I was at the rehab center. So in total, I guess about 3 months. And they gradually weaned me off of it. So when I was in the ICU, that's completely how I got all my nutrition, completely through the Sonderfooting. I didn't eat any food at all.
Mm-hmm.
And then once I got to rehab, they started only putting me on the liquid feeding at night when I would sleep, which meant I had to eat during the day. And then they would put me on a special diet. Special only in terms of how the food was prepared. It had to be very minced. It had to be minced up very, very fine.
Yeah.
Because I had suffered a lot of damage to my throat. My throat still hasn't fully recovered. I don't know if I've coughed during our interview here, but I still cough at times because there's still damage in my throat. You know, you figure I had about 30 days worth of ventilator stuffed down my throat. To keep the ventilator in place, there's a kind of balloon that they blow up in your throat to keep it in place. So I had that. At a certain point, they took the ventilator out and did a tracheotomy. So then I have a hole cut in my throat and I'm breathing through the bottom of my neck. Then I have the Sonderfooting going down there as well. And then you have the virus itself that kind of irritated and shrunk all my muscles everywhere. So through scar tissue from all that and just natural shrinkage, it was hard to swallow. So I was on a special diet for a while where all the food was very finely chopped up,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And I found that certain liquids were actually very difficult to drink. Anything that was very sort of thick and dairy, like a smoothie, you know, some food would just kind of stick to my throat. And I found bread, for example, something to be very difficult to eat. You know, you would chew the bread and then it
Six.
kind of absorbs water. It would stick to my throat.
Yeah.
you know. So I was on a special diet, and I also learned what I could manage to eat and what I couldn't.
Can you eat normal now?
Now, yes, there's hasn't been anything that I've come across that I have troubles with now. I have to make sure that I chew completely.
Yeah.
Um, um, the only thing I have about eating right now is I don't like to eat spicy foods right now. It just makes it harder to eat. You know,
That's
I'm already concentrating enough. I'm chewing well enough. I'm swallowing that I just decided right now I'm just not going to eat spicy foods. There goes all the flavor.
no. Oh wow. Uh, okay, so the rehab period, that was I think a month or 2 months.
The rehab was 2 months. I was in the rehab center for 2 months.
Yeah. Um, were you optimistic then?
Uh, Gosh. Well, I'll tell you what. My experience at the rehab center started on a bit of a downer. So I was not very optimistic when I first got there. You know, I said earlier that a lot of this is new
Hmm.
to people and even to these medical centers. So when I was put in the rehab center, uh, they put me in isolation again. They put me in a room all by myself, and they wouldn't let me leave for 5 days. They put me in isolation.
But you were negative by then, right?
I was, well, see, yes and no. Um, I didn't have any more of the symptoms. I wasn't well, so I still had damage that I was recovering from.
Hmm.
Um, but the day I left the hospital, they did a PCR test, and actually I tested positive. Now, when I got that news, I immediately requested to speak to the doctor, and I'm, you know, told them I was confused. How could this be? You told me 2 weeks ago I was negative. I'm leaving 2 months ago. How could it be that I still have it all after all this time? You know, I was confused, maybe a little bit anxious. But what was explained to me is you get the virus, you're treated for it, but it can be that remaining in your blood and in your system are the particles
Oh yes. Yeah.
of the virus. And if you have a good test, like the PCR test, it will still detect these inactive, non-contagious particles in your system.
Hmm.
It doesn't know that the test is not designed to say is it contagious or not. It just says, is it present, yes or no?
Yeah.
And so that's what happened. The day that I moved from the hospital to the rehab, I had a PCR. It gave a positive symbol, a positive result. So now at the rehab center, they're freaking out. They put me in a room all by myself. They put all the PPE by the door. So anytime a nurse came in, they hated me so much because every time they came in, they had to put on the gown, put on the visor, put on a mask, put on gloves, put on a hairnet, you know. And then they come into the room and they say yes, and maybe I just ask for a glass of water or something, you know. So you're asking about optimism. So I didn't have a good introduction into the rehab. I was immediately put into quarantine. And then I had this one nurse that first week. She looks at me and she says, "So, you had your intake. Did they tell you how long you'll be here?" And I says, "No." She says, "Well, I've seen other patients here. I think you'll be here 3 to 4 months." So that was the big, oh, what? You know, because at that time, it's end of December. I'm thinking, can I get home for January, for my birthday in January? You know, my son's birthday's coming up. Can I get home for that? All these different things. And so this nurse says, "Yeah, from what I've seen, I think you'll be here 3 or 4 months." So the first week was kind of a downer, and the rehab was kind of hard. But I think once I started doing the rehab, I started feeling better. Then I felt, you know, I was not in the gym lifting weights, but I felt back in my element. I felt a little bit more in control. I felt like, okay, let's see where I am now, how many reps I can do on this, how many minutes I can go on this, at what resistance, let's record it, come back next time and do a little bit more. I just felt back in that mode of similar to strength training, of just incrementally doing a little bit more each time.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's when I started to become more optimistic.
Because I think you're recording most of your sessions. I see.
I recorded most of it. I couldn't get it all.
No.
I relied, sometimes I would have to rely on the staff person with me on holding a camera.
Yeah.
Some of them were very enthusiastic. Sure, you want me to do it? I'm holding it for you, no problem. Others were like, do we have to do that? And then I had a few that said, look, I'm here to treat you. Don't ask me to do that.
Okay.
And because we're in Europe, then I constantly had reminders. Nobody else can be in the video.
Mm-hmm. Privacy. Yep.
Nobody else's face can be showing in the videos, you know. So I had to be careful about that all the time. And that's why, if for anyone that might have been following, or if you saw, you might see that sometimes I had to, you know, if you're standing in a circle and your therapy for the afternoon is kicking a football around in a circle of 6 people, well, I can't follow the ball because I'll get somebody's face. So I just have to point down at the feet. You know, I had a few of those. I had a few of those where I'm way off center, but I had to, because if I centered it, then somebody else was in the picture. You know?
Yeah.
But I was fortunate to have a few that were very cooperative and really appreciative of it, and would hold the camera for me as I went up and downstairs, take a picture of me of if I was walking down the street. You know, one guy did the video of me while I'm riding a bike in Bomba Park. So, yeah.
What exercise do you miss the most?
From normal training?
Yes.
Gosh.
Squat.
Well, I guess I'd probably have to say the deadlift.
Okay.
Only because, you know, naturally, because of how your body's built, it's the lift you can lift the most weight on. And for me in particular, the deadlift is my strongest lift, not only because I can lift the most, but when I look at powerlifting standards for men my age and size, then my deadlift, when I'm at my peak, would be elite status. And my squat would be advanced, and my bench press would suck as intermediate.
What's your PR? What was your PR on the deadlifts?
My best was 215 in kilos.
Okay.
And so if there's any American or UK people, that's 474 pounds.
Okay. That is quite impressive.
You know, I feel good about it, at least because I was over 50 when I did it.
Yeah. Wow. And have you been deadlifting like recently? Have you trying to get back to it?
Well, you know, the physiotherapist that I'm working with now for about 2 weeks now has me doing Romanian deadlifts.
Yes.
So I've started doing Romanian deadlifts. We're going very, very slowly. We never add more than 1 kilo per week.
Yeah.
And then depending how it feels the first time and the second time, we add some reps. And then we add another kilo. So that's the closest thing. I've done some push-ups. But yeah.
Okay. And when is your next session at rehabilitation center?
Let's see. I'm doing Monday and Thursday this week.
Okay.
And so I did one yesterday. I'll have a video to post for that later tonight when we get off here.
Yeah.
And then I'll be going back Thursday. And I'm twice a week there, and it tends to be Mondays and Thursdays.
And are you self-sufficient now? Like, can you do stuff on your own?
Well, I can. I can cook. I can shower. I can change my clothes. But it's a lot harder than it used to be. I tend to take shortcuts at breakfast. I tend to only really cook something on the stove on the weekends. And then Monday through Friday, I have to get up kind of early to get my son to school. So then I make a kind of power oats mixture where I mix oats, whey protein, some low sugar syrup, peanut butter, and some fruit and water. You know, and so I'll mix that all up in a bowl and I'll just eat that. And they prescribed to me this high protein drink here when I left the rehab center. So I get this delivered to me. It's called NutriDrink.
Yeah.
I drink that. So I can. I sometimes do some of the cooking at dinner time. So the answer is yes, but it's much more difficult than it used to be. You know, things that we would take for granted, anything you can do in a day, I can do. But when you put it all together back to back to back, then it starts to get fatiguing. You know, if you think if you think of your typical morning, all the things you do, you get up, maybe you brush your teeth, you shower, you get ready, you change your clothes, you cook some breakfast, you eat, and then you finally go out. You know, yeah, I can do each of those. But when you string it all together, it can be a little bit tough for me still. And I have to slow down, and maybe in the mornings I'll put on some oxygen. I have to get up early enough so that I don't rush, you know.
Because has your lung been repaired? Like, what's the...
Good question. So the last week of February, I had a CT scan and I think it's called a spirometry test. CT scan, maybe you know what that is. It's a way that they can image tissue in your body, and they can take different layers of it, so they really get a chance to see layer by layer the tissue of your body. And so then they can really see level by level what's happening in my lungs. And then the spirometry test was literally taking a tube, holding my nose, seeing how much air I could breathe in and how much air I could breathe out.
Mm-hmm.
And so between these two things, the doctor assessed that my lung was about 60% of normal at the end of February, which was a huge improvement from where I was in November. So we're a month later, I feel like I'm getting better week to week. So I have to see. So at least the last time I got tested, it was 60% at the end of February. The CT scan and the spirometry test is something that's done once every 3 months. So I'll go back and do it again in May.
Yeah.
But the doctor has already, a lot of the things that I've gone through have been kind of learning by experience, by going through them, because a lot of these very particular steps that I've gone through and experienced are not the things that you hear about in the news.
Yeah.
So for example, probably lots of people have heard that if you end up with COVID in the ICU, that you probably get on a ventilator, and that's pretty bad, and maybe understand the difference that the ventilator is literally just pumping the air around. But what's less known is that the ventilators can also cause damage. The ventilators can cause damage two ways. They might circulate the air too fast, and suddenly too much air is getting pumped into your lungs. Mm-hmm. They can cause damage because it's a tube. And if it's in there for 30 days, it's pressing against tissue and can cause damage.
Yeah.
And the doctor could see this in the CT scan, that there is some fibrosis, some tissue damage in the lung from the ventilator, actually. Mm-hmm. So the doctor has already told me probably 5 to 10% of the lung capacity I won't get back, because it's just damaged from the ventilator, not the virus. The ventilator did it.
Gosh.
So to be optimistic now, then, getting up to 90, maybe 95% of lung capacity would be my goal right now. That's probably what's achievable.
And I think this will be my last question, looking at the time. Do you still need a vaccine, and will you want to get vaccinated?
I've
like a whole new life about this, maybe, but in short.
in theory, I have the antibodies from the virus in me now. Mm-hmm. How long will they last? I don't know. But I already contacted my GP last week asking when are they going to get the vaccine, because absolutely when it's my turn, I will take it. Okay. Now what I am hearing from my doctors is that I should only need one shot. According to my doctors, because I have the antibodies, one shot will be enough. Because for everybody else that hasn't had the virus, the second shot is just an extra booster.
Okay.
Which I'm told by my doctors I don't need. I got the booster the unfortunate way. I got the virus and I got the natural antibodies. So I'm still within 6 months of leaving the hospital and when I got the virus. So in theory, I should still be within the range of having the antibodies. But absolutely, when it's my turn, I will get my one shot if that's what I get.
Okay. Very curious when that will happen, because I don't know if you follow the news and the politics, but it's quite a mess.
Yeah. I don't know how many of your followers are from outside the Netherlands, but first of all, they started late here, first week of January. Then you've had these interruptions with AstraZeneca.
I don't know if you remember, after every press conference, we would talk about it. I think, like, oh, they're not really measures here. It's all flexible, and we never had like a strict lockdown. People don't want to be locked up, especially not now, because they're fed up with it, basically.
I'm let's say that I've been through a bad enough experience. I don't mind being locked up if it keeps me safe. Maybe that's not what people would expect to hear, but I've been through it once. I don't want to take any chance again. So I don't really do much these days. I don't mind staying in. Excuse me. I told you there's some coughing sometimes.
Take it easy. Take your time.
Sometimes people that know me well and know my affinity for working out in the gym ask me, hey, you must be dying to go back to the gym, right? I bet you can't wait to go back. And actually, I don't think about going back to the gym at all right now. It's just not on my mind. I need to personally recover and just get normal to be in a position to be conditioned to be ready to train. And even when that happens, I don't think I want to go back until it's safe. And safe means the virus is not a threat anymore, which means it's magically gone. Everybody's gotten it, or everybody's gotten vaccinated. And when I say everybody, I'm throwing the net quite wide. We live in such a globally connected environment these days. It's not enough to say 95% of people living in the Netherlands are vaccinated. I don't even know if that's enough for me anymore, because it's such a globally connected world. The Netherlands is such a hub in the world for products and people, and so many international companies have their administrations, regional administration here. There's so many people traveling. So what if we're 95% vaccinated here, and a guest from a country that's not so well vaccinated comes into my gym and infects people, So I'm casting the net quite wide when I say I don't want to go back until it's safe.
Wow. You wouldn't expect it.
Well, I've been through it once, and it's been the most awful experience of my life, and I don't want to come close to anything like that again.
Wow. It's very inspiring, and to be fair, I have still so many questions, so I might connect with you again, maybe for seconds.
Well, let's see what the feedback is here. I was quite honored when you asked me to do this, and then when I read in your stories the last few days that you were kicking off the stories and I would be the first, I thought, oh my God, I got to make this good, because I don't want to be the guy that was the first and the last, because it just didn't go well. So let's see what the feedback is. If you enjoyed it, if your followers liked it, then I would be happy to connect again and touch on other topics, whether it's training or anything else.
I mean, if the followers would love to hear about certain topics, or if you want to talk about other topics regarding this issue or something else, life in Amsterdam or the US politics, now let's forget about that.
Let's leave it to the followers, with the audience, what they want to hear about. Nothing is really off the table for me.
My page, I think maybe you can save it as well. I'm not too sure. I'm gonna experience it all, and then if we have good feedback, then I think there will be a second life, because I mean, to me, you're quite an inspiration. Like, you're still here, you're standing, and you're optimistic.
Well, at the end of the day, I'm an optimistic person, but quite frankly, for me, that's what it's taken to get through this. So, you know, one suggestion, you know, I've been so kind of paying attention to your questions and trying to think about how to answer them that I haven't been minding the comments stream here at all. So before we disconnect, if I don't know if you want to go through there and see if there's any questions that have come up.
Let me see. Oh, I think one of them is saying, stay safe and get fit. You'll get there. You're alive and with your family, and that's all what really matters, right? Thanks for the whole story. Super interesting to hear such a personal story. That's very kind. And I think you might know this person, Arvian Gailey. I made it, Patrick.
Oh, yes. Okay. Yes, I
think
know who that is. I'm looking for it. I don't see it. Guys, I think this is one of my followers from the Philippines. So they're like 6 hours ahead of us. Can you imagine what time it is? Thank you so much. Salamat.
Wow. I don't see other. Someone says nice. I don't see any other questions, I think. But if there are any questions, just pop it here. We can still stay around for a couple of minutes if it's okay with you.
I have time. Yeah, it's no problem. We're 12 minutes away from curfew anyway, so I've got nowhere to go.
Oh, that's true. There's still a curfew. But what do you think about that? I think the start was in January, I think, the 23rd. And it would only last 2 weeks, they said. And look at us now. It's still ongoing until at least the end of this month. Do you think it's effective?
Do I think it's effective? Yes, and I don't know. So
yeah.
I think yes, because the idea is that the virus is spreading socially through dinner parties, through people out at night. And so I think that's been the biggest reason to have the curfew, to force people to be away from each other. And the I don't know comes from, you know what, I don't know how often we get to see the demographics of who the virus is spreading amongst these days. Is it still the pensioners and senior citizens, or is it the midlife people? Is it people in their 20s or 30s? You know, I just don't see enough of the news of exactly what the demographics are lately to be able to say, yeah, curfew makes sense. If it's the pensioners and the senior citizens that are still getting it, they're probably in bed sleeping by 8 o'clock anyways. So it doesn't do anything for them, right? But if it's the young people going out for dinner, having a drink after work, and if that's where the virus is still spreading, then I would say, yeah, it makes sense. But, you know, if I was healthy and we didn't have the virus, I'd probably just be at the gym right now anyways. So it doesn't make that much difference to me.
Well, the gyms still stay closed.
Yeah, but I'm saying if we didn't have this, the gym where I go to,
yeah.
this is another, you were asking me differences. Here in Amsterdam, if the gym stays open till 11 o'clock, even midnight, it's like a big deal.
Yes, definitely.
You have gyms in the US, their whole brand name is 24-hour fitness. So guess how many hours a day they're open? 24 hours.
Oh, there's a question. I don't know if you can see the questions. Can you see them?
I see who has joined.
Okay, the question is, how do the images of all the COVID protests make you feel since you've been through the dark side of...
You know, that's a difficult question, because on the one hand, my immediate reaction would be, this is ignorance, right? But there's also a sympathetical way to look at it. And I think it depends on the nature of the person that is protesting. And generally, I think what I see are maybe, I would say, probably three different types of protesters.
Mm-hmm.
The one that I'm most sympathetic to is a small business owner, a person who works on their own. And now, because of all these restrictions, their way of earning a living has been drastically affected. And they're just struggling, trying to figure out a way how to pay their mortgage and pay their child's expenses month to month. And so they've been hit by it financially that way. And I'm a little bit more sympathetic to those kind of protesters who are just looking for a way to get through and on with their lives and maintain a reasonable level of living. I'm more sympathetic to those kind of people. What I'm not so sympathetic with is the naysayers, the people that say COVID is fake, that it's all a hoax, that it's not real. This I'm not so sympathetic with. This one I would say, I don't want to say angers me, but it certainly gets emotional reaction out of me. The people that say that it's not, that it didn't occur, that it's not real, that it's some global conspiracy, right?
I know that there was another one of my followers who got COVID as well. He's from Eindhoven, Brabant. I don't know it, and he was actually on one of the well, and he got so many threat messages, Facebook, Instagram. It was like he was posting all those messages on his story just to show what kind of people were existing. And did you receive any threat messages or people telling like it's all fake? Are you getting paid or something?
No. The worst thing that has happened to me on social media is somebody makes a story or a post, and it's a group of people very close together in a bar drinking or having dinner together without masks. So very obviously just not paying attention to any of the social distancing guidelines.
Yeah.
And then I might write a comment and say, oh, do you not have the virus there? Hey, what about the social distancing? And this will be when I get a response. This will be the time somebody says, hey, buddy, F off. Or, hey, if you don't like it, don't follow. Or the whole thing's a hoax or something like this, So it usually takes me doing something not so risque, but just saying, hey, what about the social distancing? You guys are next to each other. You're not wearing a mask. How's it work over there? It'll take something like that for me to get some kind of feedback. But otherwise, the stuff I do, people don't like it. I guess they just stop following because I don't really get any comments like this. I do share some of this on Facebook, but my Facebook is very private. If I don't know you, then I don't connect with you. So I think by default, I've got a group of sympathetic people that are seeing it on Facebook. And I only put some of the training stuff on my public Instagram. Some of the more personal things, I don't always share there. So, but that's interesting that you say that. I haven't got that. I said, back to the question about the three types. So the person who's not working for a large corporation who gets paid to work from home, just making their own money on their own business. I have sympathy for them, the way they've been affected in that socially and the government can't do more things for them or can't come up with a way for them to be more productive. Then you have the people that think the whole thing is a hoax. I don't really have any patience for them. And then you have people that make a big case about their rights and their freedoms being violated. I'm not one of these people that feels that way. And again, my perspective, and I have a bias. I was one of the few people that got hospitalized from this. So I have a bias. And I have more of a community sense that the way to get through this is going to take everybody working together.
Yeah.
People say, you can't force me to do this because you're taking away my right. If I choose to go on to public transportation without a mask and expose myself, that's my risk. That's fine if somebody wants to think that. But as soon as you take the risk in this environment with the virus, you're putting me and everybody else at risk too. And I don't accept that. So there's this line where you say, My right and what I can do is way up here. Yeah, but as soon as you do that, you've crossed my line of to be safe.
Yeah.
We can't all be risk-free if somebody is choosing not to be risk. Did I say that right? We can't all be safe, I should say, if somebody chooses not to be and wants to take on their own risk. It just doesn't work. As soon as you do that, you put everybody else at risk too. And I don't think people have the right to do that.
We all need to take our responsibility, you say?
Yeah. That's what a society does.
I think someone says, hope you recovered well, bro. It's Alfred.
Alfred, hope you recovered, bro. Okay.
And Mick Energy is asking, or he's saying, Patrick, when you recover more, will you consider training at home to install a power rack?
Yeah, I thought about that already. I'm not ready to start training. One of the things that has to happen now that I've come home, my son is getting older. He doesn't have a room of his own. So one of my projects is making room for himself. So I need to move a bunch of things around. And at the same time, I'm thinking, hey, maybe this is the chance I can reorganize some things and make room for a power rack. Like I know this guy. I guess he doesn't want me to say his real name, but I know what Mick Energy and his question about the power rack. I have thought about it. I don't know if I'll do it, but yeah. I have thought about it, rearranging, make space for a power rack. You know, I live in an apartment building. I have neighbors below, neighbors next door. What happens if I get back to deadlifting 200 pounds and I put it down? You know,
yeah.
There's probably people out there that have done it and have figured out ways how to pad their floors and build a wooden rack to do it. I don't know. You know, you also have to put it into context. The gym that I go to and that I like very much is about 700 meters away from me. And they're open till 11 o'clock at night. And has proper lifting platforms and chalk. And I can slam the weights. There's people that do Olympic lifting and drop the weights from above their head, you know. So I have everything I need very close by and within, 11 o'clock till night.
You don't need...
I don't think I need it. The only reason I would really do it if I really get the urge to start training again and the fitness centers aren't open and I still don't feel safe from the virus, then that might be the time I do it.
Okay, that's clear. I don't know the name. That's one of my followers. He says, what a kind-hearted man.
Well, I don't know who that is. Thank you very much for those kind words from you. What can I say? I've lived 50 plus years. I've lived through this disease. I'm a father now. And so my perspective of things has changed. If we would have had this interview 20, 30 years ago, probably I wouldn't be saying the same things, you know? Probably there was a period of time when I lived in the U.S. I didn't think I could ever leave. And I would have sound like some of the people you see on TV saying USA, USA, number one, Netherlands, number two, right? But I don't feel that way anymore. Quite frankly, whenever I hear somebody say, oh, the U.S. is the greatest place on earth, it's the greatest country on earth, I'm usually the first person to say, that's great that you feel that way. Tell me why. Why is it the greatest place? Oh, I just truly believe that. Great, you truly believe that. But tell me why. It just is. All right, well, not enough.
They can't tell why. No.
Yeah.
Okay, it's 10 o'clock here in the Netherlands. It was a lovely, lovely conversation. I think I would love to have a second one with you if you would be up for it, obviously.
I'm up for it. There's a lot of topics here there's some topics that we went pretty deep on.
Yeah.
There's some we kind of skimmed over.
I hope you didn't, by the way. There were some very personal questions. I was very curious. It was like my own curiosity. I wanted to...
If I didn't want to answer them, I would have said so. I would have said, no, off the table. Don't want to talk about that. But I kind of knew coming into this that anything would be on the table.
Just what was exactly, going to be the topics? Like, in big lines, yes, but I didn't send you a list of questions or something.
I wasn't sure. So I had to kind of use what you put in the stories as, okay, we're going to talk about some of those things.
I wanted to keep it as spontaneous as possible.
And that it was. Everyone, you can know that I didn't really have any clue exactly what we would be talking about. only saw what the rest of you saw in your story. And I think we connected on Instagram through powerlifting here in the Netherlands, so that we had that kind of in common. And I've been following your stories over the last few months of the things you're doing between law and now your internship as a reporter, and seeing how that goes, plus your travels. So anyways, like I said before, I was very flattered and honored that you asked me to do this. And then when I saw I would be the first, I thought, okay, don't blow it. don't be the one that crashes this party.
Thank you for accepting it. And I'm sure we'll stay in touch, and probably be a second life.
I wouldn't mind. Thank you very much. And
Great.
Good luck and good health to all of you out there as well.
Good night.
Good night.